With fall muskies really starting to heat up now, I'm going to give you my top 3 and one little bonus setup that I probably catch the most muskies on every year. All these setups are unique in their own ways, whether that's rod length, rod power, reel speed, and leader setup. So each leader actually pairs with each setup so that as a whole, these setups, rod, reel, line, leader, all work perfectly for the baits you're trying to throw on them. So setup number 1, this is my bucktail setup, my blade setup. Anything basically where you're going to cast straight and reel it in, discluding like big rubber. So blades, spinner baits. If I have blades in front of something like a swim bait, I'll probably throw it on this setup, but this is kind of the horsepower setup with a specific leader that really works well for vibrating noisy baits. So this setup is 9/6 extra heavy. This is long, really lets you reach in the figure eights, lets you make really long casts. And then I have a medium speed reel. It's sort of a big debate with blades, guys, whether you want a high speed retrieve that really lets you burn the baits, or a low speed that gives you a lot more power, especially with double 10s, double 12s, that sort of thing. I am running 300 size reels. This is all I feel you really need. This is mid-range reel, 6.3 to 1, and it seems to work well for blades. You still get a nice balance of that horsepower, and then you also can burn them if you want to. 9/6 extra heavy, long, allows you to reach really far, and it also doesn't load over too much with heavy blades. Like if you're throwing 10s and 12s, especially in the figure eight, that can cause your rod to really load up, which is gonna make it a lot harder to feel in darker water. It's gonna make it a lot harder to get a good hook set when your rod is already loaded up in the figure eight. So having a stiffer rod like this works well for throwing big blades. And then lastly, this is a 6-inch straight wire leader. And so I make these myself, just bend this up and put a little bit of shrink tube on there so that it doesn't nick my line. But this allows your blades, your noisy vibration style baits to really translate their vibrations into the water. And yeah, with like the straight out, straight back in, you never have an issue with snagging. And it's short enough that you really can get a nice wide figure eight out of it. It seems like, I mean, figure eights are now so huge anyway. It seems like 80% of my muskies a year come in the 8, but blades in particular, muskies seem to just follow, whether it's almost like a hypnotic thing, you know, they're dialed into a humming lure that's moving at the same pace. So you really just need to make sure you're going to be able to capitalize on those fish when they come into the 8 on blades, because muskies follow now a lot anyways, but with blades it seems to be even more of a thing. So a good figure eighting setup, stiff tip, short leader, and 80-pound Suffix Pro Mix. That's the bucktail setup right there. All right, number 2. This is sort of your classic musky rod setup, fluorocarbon leader, 80-pound test. If you're gonna have one musky rod, this is sort of your do-it-all, but it does have a specific place for me in the lineup. I've been playing with the difference between a 9-foot heavy and a 9/6 extra heavy. I'm not exactly sure what I like better yet. 9/6 extra heavy or a 9-foot heavy Omen musky. This is my rubber setup, swim bait setup, pull pause baits, excluding dive and rise. I'll show you that's a different setup. This is actually the faster reel. So this is the 8.1 to 1. And the reason being is that I work my rubber a lot of the time with the rod, and then I use the reel to pick up slack. So I want to be able to make a big rip and then just quickly pick up slack in a couple turns. It just makes your life a lot easier when you're ripping big baits like that. You're not really using the horsepower of the reel to crank in these baits, so you can get away with a higher gear ratio reel. Lets you pick up that slack fast, 80-pound braid. And then with this, again, I tie my own fluorocarbon leaders. This is a bit long, but when I stretch my hands like this, it's 9 inches. So I wasn't super accurate with that, but in an ideal world, I would tie my leaders like this, 9 inches. So that's 9 inches of fluorocarbon to a swivel, to a loop knot, and then to a split ring. You have to tie the loop knot with the split ring. You can't just tie a snug knot to the split ring because the split ring obviously has to turn. So what I do here is I tie that's a figure 8 knot to the swivel, And then this is called a double figure 8 loop knot. And you can search up videos how to tie it, but essentially it's 2 figure 8 knots that sort of just snug together like this and create that loop. Super strong setup, and I also like not having a ton of metal on my setup. Like I'd like to eliminate the most amount of metal that I can, and you'll see that even in some of the next setups here. But that is a swivel knotted to fluorocarbon, 130 pound fluorocarbon knotted to the split ring, and I love that setup. I trust it a lot. The other thing about running a little bit longer leaders with these setups is with the pull pause, sometimes what'll happen is you'll pull the bait and it'll actually gain enough momentum that it'll outrun your leader and your leader will be behind it. And so if the fish eat it in this position, they're actually gonna grab a hold of the bait with your leader in its mouth. So if you're running like a short 6-inch leader like the wire setup I have, sometimes, rarely this is going to happen, but sometimes your bait will outrun your leader. The drag from your leader will cause it to go behind, fall behind. This is the nose of the bait, fall behind, and a muskie will eat it from here and clamp your leader, and you don't want mainline in the teeth of a muskie. So making sure you keep just a little on the longer side. 9 inches is kind of my minimum. I've never had issues with 9, but you know, you can run a 12, it'll be safer, but you're gonna lose a little bit of that figure 8 finesse, if you will. But that's just something for you to play around with. And yeah, that's setup number 2. All right, my third setup, and this is something sort of unique that I kind of designed myself. I was never really happy with how jerkbaits fished on big musky leaders, and so I just played around for a few years until I came up with a system that I am really happy with. It allows me to fish the baits the way I want to fish them, and you're not having a big conking leader hindering the action of your jerkbaits, because they are a bait that you have to work. You're not reeling them in, you're not pulling them and pausing them. You know, you're working these baits and trying to get them to twitch and react to the motions you're trying to implement into them. My solution to that is the 6.3 to 1. You could definitely get away with like the 8.1 to 1 on these. I find the 6.3 to 1 just forces me a little bit to slow down. I like to fish them just a little bit slower, and so a 6.3 to 1 just sort of forces me to slow down a little bit, but it's still fast enough that you have no problem picking up the slack in between those smaller twitches. And it's different too than throwing big rubber, because that's like a big sweep and then you want to pick up the slack quick. Where like this is like a small twitch, so you can kind of just twitch and then like half a turn, 3/4 of a turn picks up the slack from a small twitch. So you don't need a super fast gear ratio for jerkbait. 6.3 to 1 is kind of perfect for me. I either fish an 8.6 heavy or a 9-foot heavy. The 8.6 heavy allows me to work the bait better, period. I find I have a lot more control over the lure with an 8.6 heavy, but you lose a little bit of casting distance and you lose a little bit of reach in the 8. I'm also fishing out of a Kingfisher, so with a little bit higher gunnels, I find the 9-foot to be pretty good. If you're in a bass boat, 8'6", you probably get away with just fine, but this gives me a little more reach in the 8, and the 9-foot still allows me to work the bait pretty well, especially with this leader system. So again, 80-pound braid. With this leader, this one got a little bit short because I had to retie it. But again, I usually run them about 9 inches. My fingers right here are 9 inches. So if I'm just, like, I keep all this leader material in the boat, so if I get a nick, I can just retie a new leader. Super simple. But if you see that right there, see how it's sticking perfectly straight out? That is the key to this setup, and that is one of the reasons why this leader setup is so ideal for me. This is 130-pound monofilament, and so a lot of people think that monofilament floats. I've done a little bit of testing, and my consensus is that it does not float. What it does do, though, is it doesn't break the surface tension until you've broken the surface tension, and then it'll sink. So it's almost neutrally buoyant. And braid floats. So you have this little knot right here. Because this mono sinks just a little bit in the water, this braid is just enough to combat that. And this is basically a perfectly neutrally buoyant leader. And so I don't want a swivel here. I don't want any metal up here on the leader, because I want this to, when I twitch it, I want it to just hang there. and then I can twitch it again this way and it'll just hang. Twitch, hang. And the other thing about mono is it's all coily, whatever. When you first get it out of the package, tie it up, you fish with it a little bit, and then when you hook up your bait to your rod and pull it tight, and then move to your next spot or let it dry overnight, it dries perfectly straight like that. And so this acts like a wire leader because it's super responsive and it's always sitting straight, but it's neutrally buoyant. And this basically allows you to fish these lures like you're tied straight braid onto your bait. And so right here I have a crazy Alberto knot attaching my braid to my fluorocarbon, and then again the double figure 8 loop knot. And so this basically has no metal on it. I use a split ring to attach my baits. No metal on it. It's neutrally buoyant. It dries straight, and it allows you to just tap, 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 and fish your jerk baits super well. I feel like I'm giving away all my secrets, but I've made a video on this in the past, and this is by far, without a doubt, in my opinion, the best way to fish jerk baits for muskies. You might say, ooh, mono, 130 pound mono, yeah, you might have to retie after a fish, but up until this point, knock on wood, I've never had a muskie bite through this, and I don't think I will. It seems pretty good. The other thing is that with jerk baits, you can get away with a shorter leader, lets you tap them, especially if you're not ripping them super hard where you run the risk of your bait outrunning the leader. So that is my jerk bait setup. So now, I've sort of kept you hanging here. This is a setup that allows me to throw things like super shad wraps, super shadow wraps, some of those killer smaller Rapala lures. They work extremely well for muskies. I know muskies eat big meals, and a lot of times big baits are what you need to throw to get them to bite, but there is a huge time and a place for throwing smaller baits. This setup right here allows me to still have a ton of power to whoop a muskie. It isn't so undergunned that you're gonna stress these fish. I can get them in pretty much just as quick on this setup as I would with my bigger setups. This is 13 Fishing Defy Black 8-foot heavy swim bait rod. So this is when you're down in Texas or whatever throwing those huge swim baits for largemouth. This rod is built for that, and it handles muskies just fine. This is a 200 size reel. I don't even think you need a 300 for this. This is 50 pound line. With the really heavy lures, you backlash a lot more on thin line because it digs into the spool. And so that's one of the main reasons to run heavy line on heavy lures, is just for smooth casting. Yeah, it lets you jack them with a 9.6 extra heavy, give them the beans. But because this is a lighter setup, you're not going to be stressing this line the same way that a 9.6 extra heavy is going to be stressing 50 pound. So you can get away with 50 pound on an 8-foot heavy and a 100 pound leader and whoop a muskie on this thing, but it's also finesse enough that you can throw those small baits a mile and still work them with precision. That is the issue with throwing those small little baits on big muskie rods is, you know, it's like jigging for walleyes with a flipping stick. You're just not going to do it. This is a fluorocarbon leader, so it's not the same mono setup that I throw with the jerkbait leader, but it is tied in here, so you still get a lot of responsiveness out of this leader. And again, tied down here. So no metal on this leader other than the split ring. Right now there's a snap on there, a clip, but usually I'd run a split ring. In an ideal world, again, that would be a 9 to 10 inch leader, 100 pound line, a big super beefy bass setup. But with that 100 pound fluorocarbon leader, you can fish those small baits with precision, get the action that you want out of them, and still whoop a muskie when push comes to shove and you hook that monster. But this little setup with things like the super shad wrap catches probably, like not even exaggerating, a third of my muskies a year, maybe a half my muskies a year, and that's on Lake of the Woods. Like, this is big bait territory up here, and they still love to bite the super shad wraps. So that's the setup. That's sort of my finesse muskie rod setup, if you want to call it that. Still tons of power to battle those big fish. All right, guys, well, there's my 4 muskie setups. You have your blade setup, your rubber setup, your jerkbait setup, and then your small bait setup. And those 4 rods right there, I don't necessarily bring all 4 out every day I'm going. It depends what I'm doing. But if you have those 4 setups, you're gonna be able to cast for muskies all season, have all your bases covered, and be able to fish each type of bait the way that it's designed to be fished and have a ton more control over those baits. And also, I think it just helps you land more fish when you're set up like this. At least in my opinion, I think that being set up like this, really getting it dialed in, allows you and gives you the opportunity to hook and land more muskies. So there's my 4 casting muskie setups that I use all season. If you guys have any questions, shoot me a DM on Instagram, leave a comment in this video. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And good luck muskie fishing this fall. I'm excited because I think they're going to be hungry, and they're always big this time of year. So I'm ready to get after it.